Okay, welcome divas and dudes to the nutrition class for the ThriveWell organization, and I'm so excited to get to be here. I'm Suzanne Ryman. I'm getting used to not saying Powerhouse Bakery anymore, so I had to work that one in. But I'm so excited to get to be here and share some more information as we're really reviewing kind of the patriarch almost of research around nutrition and lifestyle in the health and wellness community around cancer. And so what I'm excited about is to really share how this one book really set the stage for a lot of great research and studies. And so that's where we're going. And of course, I always love to dig in a little deeper. And so what we're going to do here is learn about how this compelling blend of science and really a personal story has set the stage for people in the research arena, in the medical community, just to start asking really good questions, trying to understand not only how do we treat it better, but what's the etiology around the disease, and how do we, as a world, address this horrible disease. And you know what I love is when I looked at some of the kind of summaries and just notes around this book, I thought it was interesting that some of the folks that read the book or are aware of the book had some somewhat not critical, but just some comments that made us really think about how we view expert opinion, especially when it's written in a book for layman's terms. Self-help books can oftentimes be too general, sometimes trite, as far as giving us information around promoting a healthy lifestyle. Sometimes it can almost feel like finger pointing too, especially if you have a cancer diagnosis and we are kind of said, we're being told that if you do this and this and this, you won't get cancer. And I think that's very dangerous because we know that there's so much more to it. And I feel like we definitely want to do everything we can, but we also know that there's so many unknowns that sometimes we're not going to really have all the answers. Sometimes it's snake oil pitch for marketing, trying to sell a supplement or a diet plan. And if you've been around me very much, you know that that's something that I'm really against. I feel like we as patients have a great opportunity to be knowledgeable so that we can ask the right questions and be skeptical. Whenever there's money to be made in the market economy, sometimes we leave out information or we embellish other information to make us feel like we have to have this product in order to avoid cancer, fight cancer, prevent it from coming back. So there's so many products out there like that, so many diet plans. And, some of them are based on some pretty good information. I can't wait to share this study that I will today. But for the most part, we aren't sure. So we still look at people groups. And remember with the Anti-Cancer Diet book, the author, Dr. David, really looked at the cancer research around the China study. And I thought that was such a good use of time because that was a long, longitudinal study that looked at a big group. So we can't make specific interpretations, but we can look at trends when we look at big people groups. And so I think that's valuable. The modern lifestyle and elements of our environment are setting the stage for promoting cancer proliferation. And so that is really what he's trying to use this forum, is to help us understand what it is about our environment and what it is about our lifestyle that is contributing to this proliferation, and how the cancer cells really develop. Learning what we can do to control the terrain of our bodies so that those that are almost inevitable, these mutations, we can prevent, or at least prevent from spreading. So understanding how those mutations really happen, and then what can we do to minimize the progression. And I've said before, and I think it's an important note, that natural carcinogens do exist, the sun, for example, natural sun. And so it's not all man-made, these potential mutations that we're in contact with. But of course, the ones that are man-made, we know we have control over modifying, at least to some extent. And the fact is, once we know about them, and so that's something that I feel like has been really good with this book. And when we look at the AntiCancer Way of Life, we are looking at confronting what we know and don't know about the cancer etiology. We know that some cells are going to be promoters of that fast-growing potentiation, and we know that other cells help to stop it. We know that in our immune system, we've got amazing multiple levels of immune response. The phagocytes, for example, that identify a foreign cell, even if it's internal or external that we've somehow ingested. The phagocyte will recognize it, encase it, and kill it. And I just think that's so cool that our body has that ability. And of course, creating our own antibodies to something that's recognized from the external environment. And then our body can learn about it and match a contributor active site and, really be able to combat that. And so there's so many great ways that our body is able to use our natural working of our immune system, so that natural fighting capacity. And then understanding factors in our environment that affect our health and our longevity. So we call it, the health overall, so the morbidity and the mortality rate. And, we Americans, when we looked at COVID, we had a very high death rate from COVID. Why is that? We have great medical technology. And so is there underlying issues that make us more prone to having greater mortality in diseases? And so, with cancer, we know that there's so many great things that we can do, but in an industrialized country, there's so many things that are out of our control. So that's what I really want to be able to explore this morning and kind of get some feedback from you too, as far as what factors in your lifestyle have you really felt to be fantastic and in their own right, helping you feel better. We always want to prevent cancer from ever coming back, but we also want to enjoy every day, and so we want to make sure that we've got quality of life in each of those decision processes. And so if we talk a little bit about receptors and recognition, I know there's a lot of words on that slide, but the concept is that I want you to see that when there is natural tissue, there's a lot of individual styles of cells, and each cell has receptors that are for the good proteins, and then sometimes for they're responding to the bad proteins. So the receptors are molecules that cancer cells produce on their surface. So even the bad cells have these receptors. They can interact or bind with specific proteins called hormones in the body, and so that's why we're afraid of phytoestrogens. We're worried that that's going to promote that cancer growth. We know that if we take endogenous progesterone and estrogen, like replacement hormone therapy, sometimes that pushes this process artificially. And so whenever the protein that is on the outside of that cell is recognized, that is the combination that can perpetuate the growth. And sometimes that's, a bad growth, and sometimes it's good. Researchers, though, have identified certain receptors that fuel the growth and spread the cancer when they recognize this specific molecule. So by interrupting this recognition with the cancer drugs, these diseases, growth can actually be stopped. And so that's where a lot of exciting research is going with the phytoestrogens. And so looking at how isoflavones can really intervene with that process. And so currently we've got 3 major receptor subtypes that play an important role. And, so we know that it's the HER2 positive and the triple negative. So those subcategories of breast cancer specifically are really referring to the protein receptor sites on the lining of the cells. And so seeing that there's different types of cells, the progesterone receptor, estrogen, and then the HER2 dimer, understanding that each of those has a very specific protein receptor. And the goal of these medicines is to be able to intervene and control that relationship or that recognition. And so lifestyle matters: diet, exercise, and attitude. I love that so much of the research points to that. The good news is the things that we can control are within our reach. And while we're not really sure a lot of detail around the diet, we are sure that there's trends. There's trends to more plant-based, It doesn't mean you have to be vegan, but you have to be really specific about what proteins you choose. And then you'll see in a few other slides down that, we still need to get some of those key nutrients that are found in animal products. And yes, you can find those key ingredients in other food sources, but there's still a lot of benefit to having some lean red meats and even poultry and fish. So those can certainly be part of a healthy diet that is anti-cancer. And, the impact of the terrain, I like that phrasing. That was really from one of the quotes from the book. And I love that when we think of our body as a terrain. There's so many different elements to our health and wellness and so many potential risks. And so inhaling in the environmental toxins, even having exposure to our skin. So, we definitely need sunlight. We can't have vitamin D very well without it, but too much sunlight can be, of course, dangerous. And so we've got to really see where that terrain is going to offer us most benefit and how do we avoid the risk. So here is a really cool study. CPS, so the Cancer Prevention Study. Anybody ever hear of this? Oh my goodness, I want you to check it out. It is looking at a very large sample size. They actually garnered their participants from cancer activities, so like walks and fundraisers and different healthcare communities. But what I love is that it's over a very long period of time. It's looking at a very large population. And it's got a really nice geographical and ethical, I can't even say that word, sorry, ethnically diverse. There we go. Woo! And the enrollment period is pretty long. So it's taken a long time to get them because also they're looking at these subjects need to give us some samples. So they got to do saliva and they also have to do stool samples. And the study coordinators were concerned that they would not have good results because of asking for these samples. But lo and behold, people were so willing to help with this. And having ethnically diverse samples helps us really understand the body's response and how the body evolves over this long period of time. So it's going to be a very long study, 47 years, and we're going to learn about different types. Now they're going to be pairing the samples and they're going to be doing lots of data tracking. And so they're going to also look at a couple sub-studies. So one is looking at the activity level. So we know that I'm preaching to the choir here. Exercise seems to, the more we see exercise patterns increase, the more we see recurrence of cancer decrease. So we know that's inversely related and we're so happy about that. But we want to understand a little more detail, like how much, what type, how does it vary with age? And so all of these details are going to be tracked in this study. We really, using these trackable devices, I know there's going to be some challenges. Has anybody used a trackable device? You either wear it on your wrist or your rib cage. Oh, Mary's got one now. So they're not perfect, right? Just like when they call the subjects on the phone and they're getting a diet history. We know there's going to be a little subjective inconsistencies, we'll say. We always say we're a little taller and a little thinner than we really are. We always eat a little less fat and a little less sugar than we really do. We always eat a little more fiber than we really do. We always think we're doing so well. But when you've got a nice big sample size, those irregularities tend to kind of be weeded out. And so what I love is that they're getting some great data. And then when we look at physical activity, we know that the consistency is key. And so starting an exercise program is always the easiest thing to do. Right? Starting is so easy. It's continuing it. My years at Lifetime Fitness, we knew how it was going to work just like clocks. It was going to be January, it was packed, there was no room in the parking lot. February, maybe almost as good. March, the parking lot is now, a third less full. And by June, it was now, back to where it was. And so consistency is really the key. And so one thing that this study is going to help us understand is, what do we want to make recommendations for on exercise? Do we want to say 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week? And does it have to get your heart rate up to a certain level? And I'm pretty sure the study is going to tell us that it doesn't have to be that intense. Some of the preliminary findings are really hopeful that walking, yoga, and of course, this great overall sense of well-being. So that's why I mentioned earlier that the quality of the day is really important. So gone are the days where we have to white knuckle our experience, even in our workouts. We know that we can do a pretty good overall benefit to our wellness just by being consistent. And if some of you were here when I did the class on the super aged and doing the workouts, that beautiful lady that was in her 70s, actually there was 2 of them, and they showed quite an intense dedication, but they didn't have injuries. They didn't have swelling of limbs, and of course, injuries that made them stop doing their exercise. So that's really the key. If we go too hard, you can't keep going. And so we've got to make sure that we have that piece really mixed into the process. And then, like I said, duration. So no longer are we connected to a specific amount of time. I'm pretty sure the data is going to show us that anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, even a 4-hour hike is a great thing. You wouldn't do that every day. Your frequency and your duration would vary. So I'm really excited about how that's going to show up. And then we've got the second section, the gut and oral microbiome, which I'm so excited to look at this sub-study because, we've talked a lot about what our biome does for our health. We know that it's very critical in helping us to absorb and digest nutrients. But I think we're going to now be able to find some very specifics around what viruses, what bugs do we have that help us prevent ever getting cancer or help us prevent getting a cancer recurrence. So won't that be cool to be able to see how those are connected? Because really the understanding of how this function is, really our biome is another organ. It's going to have a very important trajectory. It's going to hopefully change how we see our medicines, because if you have ever had an antibiotic, doctors are pretty quick to go, here you go. And now if we know, based on a 47-year longitudinal massive study, that certain medicines are going to really increase your risk of getting a deadly disease, it's going to require us to do what? Think differently with our doctor. And that's the part that I love. It's going to make us go, okay, we don't want to have an infection. So what are we going to do? Well, we have to do some lifestyle changes to avoid that. We have to build our own immune system so that it can handle it. We've got so many barriers to entry for viruses and bacteria. So we just need to use those. One thing we learned in COVID was that hand washing had a big impact on the transmission. And so we tend to get lazy because we don't really think about it, maybe because we haven't been reminded that as simple as hygiene is going to absolutely help our gut biome. And then the flip side of that is true too, that excessive washing can also hurt our biome. I have a nurse practitioner that's a dear friend. She's in my Bible study, and all of her kids were severely allergic to different foods. And she's convinced it's because she was so clean that she did not share enough healthy biome with her kids. And so they were hypersensitive to their environment. So I'm hoping that as we study the gut biome more, we're going to be able to understand this with a little more detail and really be able to vet out how clean is clean. And do we really need to go immediately to a antibiotic, or can we try other things? If you've ever heard of a neti pot, it's something that kind of a wives' tale or naturopath will recommend. And I'm telling you, it's so hard, I cannot use it. My husband uses it, but it's really a saline solution that cleans out the nasal passages. And so when my primary care doctor was I saw her, she said that she always used that to help clean her passages when she was working with sick patients. She would immediately clean out and it would help her stay healthy. And so I thought, boy, that's a, kind of a home remedy that could be truly powerful if we got in the habit of using it better. So the role of the gut biome, the role of genetics. So what if we were able to weed out that genetic propensity for cancer? Understand what our DNA role really has to play in that. And I've talked a little bit about mommy's contribution to the healthy gut biome. So if you weren't here for that talk, basically if you are brought into this world with natural childbirth, you are able to be in contact with your mom's gut biome. And so that is the first inoculation, if you will, of really healthy biome. So being able to start that, and you inherit that in two ways. You inherit it from her bacteria, but also from her DNA. And so that is super valuable. So, what if you are not able to deliver naturally? Both my boys were C-section. Maybe it would be more common that all moms are encouraged to have a swab given to their baby. It's common that all babies get tested for PKU. They're all, offered the way to make sure they have vitamin K, and even for little babies, baby boys, they are whisked away and having a certain tissue cut off, and that's just normal. So how did that become such a common offer that you weren't even really offered? You don't have to be circumcised. You can have that option. It's almost just assumed that every little baby boy will go that direction. So my hope is that at some point we'll all understand the value of the biome and include the process of natural childbirth, or just, the second best, which would be a good swab for that little baby. Also in toxicity. So if we think about the role of the liver and the kidneys in helping our bodies stay healthy, clean. So, liver detoxifies our blood. So now our thought process should be completely different about how we take care of our liver. And so having a fatty liver is something that we can absolutely avoid via diet and exercise. And understanding that that has a critical role in our tolerance of medicines and, of course, in our risk factor for cancer, it would be so cool if we were taught early on that our liver needs to be taken care of. Our kidneys are very important in normalizing the hydration status. And, if little kids, as they're going through learning about biology, if we learned about the value of our organs in understanding how our body can fight off carcinogens and fight off toxins in our environment, we would have a jump start for sure. I know this has a lot of writing, so I want to just let you kind of peruse it a little bit, but this is that study that I was telling you about, past, present, and future. So it started in December of 2013 of really just, garnering the information. And when you start looking at the groups that are really involved, the American Cancer Society and the Cancer Prevention Study were really involved. And I just love the fact that now we've got survivorship information available. So invited men and women between the ages of 30 and 65 who had no personal history of cancer are the group that we're including on this study. So they actually got 303,500 from various racial and ethnic backgrounds, and look at all the areas that they came from. And it was, of course, they got the subjects to participate, and it was from the Relay of Life events, Making Strides Against Breast Cancer, and then, of course, hospitals and communities. So I would love it if we were involved in a study. I mean, nobody asked me, but I sure would participate if they invited me to. But again, 47 years is going to be long, so I'm sure we're still going to be able to be around to see some of the results, but they're also doing summaries every 10 years. And so we're just about ready for one of those summaries. And so 10,000 paired stool and saliva samples. the small group of participants registered for the first phase. That fall, we began a new sub-study about the gut microbiome. So I mentioned that a little bit. And then it was so successful that they were able to, do a little more. Again, they were apprehensive. They weren't sure if the subjects were going to be willing to share. And so, the idea is that we've got a ready population that are excited and happy to participate in finding cancer cure. And I just feel like that is super cool. And so again, when we think of the science around it, that stool sample is truly providing a snapshot in what's happening with that person. And we've talked about this in previous classes, but I just wanted to kind of bring it back that that biome is affected throughout our life by medicines, of course, by diet. And if you remember, what decreases the variety of the gut biome? Any guesses? The variety, bacteria, the variety of the bacteria. So if you are on antibiotics, that kills a lot of bacteria variety. When you eat prebiotics or probiotics, what does that do to the population of your gut? Theoretically, it increases the volume. The tough part is when you do a probiotic, it's giving you a certain kind of bug. And what we really want for a healthy gut biome is a good variety. Numbers are good, but variety is better. And so that's why I try to discourage just using probiotics prophylactically, meaning, it's probably not necessarily advantageous just to take a probiotic. Have a purpose behind it, know why you feel like you need it. And so, we're not there yet, but I think we soon will be, that we can go have our biome mapped. There is actually a couple of doctors in San Antonio for people that are really sick with ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel disease, that can have their biome mapped. And, I talked a little bit in the past about the fecal transplant, and as strange as that sounds, there's been some really good results. And that's because, I know, right? It's a crazy thought. But over time, if we lose so much variety in our biome, we're going to now be at risk for not being able to stay healthy. And so that biome is going to be studied in this whole process. So we know that medicines, but what about our lifestyle? If you prophylactically do over-the-counter medicines for constipation or diarrhea, and we overuse those, that kills the biome too. And so I try to encourage people to not use that as the first defense. Try instead to use foods that will now nourish the biome that you do have. The prebiotics are the same thing. So nourishing the biome that we do have means that we're putting in there some soluble fiber. So what does that look like? That's cooked vegetables, zucchini, mushrooms, cabbage, asparagus, spinach. It doesn't have to be kale. I know some people say, I hate kale, and that's a-okay, but find some veggies you do like. And, a couple of the recommendations are that while you don't need to be vegan, you need to have at least 2/3 of your plate full of vegetables. So I love that they're talking about that. And so this is going to really put into the official science room the importance of the variety of the biome as well as the volume. Because again, if we're doing probiotics, we don't know what kind of variety we're getting. So oftentimes taking a probiotic can be even worse than where you started. The soluble fiber adds moisture. The insoluble fiber adds roughage. And so both together helps everything move slowly through, or I should say quickly through, and slowly absorbing the water is really what we want in that gut. So again, taking a fiber supplement over the counter, either in a pill or a powder, doesn't give us any nutrients either. And so I'd much rather you get the nutrients with the fibers. And every study out there, looking at health and wellness around disease prevention talks about weight. Weight matters. And it's so interesting to me that the fat cells do change the internal environment of our bodies. And so understanding that helps us know that if our grandkids, want donuts, we think, wait a minute, that's going to affect their biome because high sugar is bad on the biome. It's going to affect their fat cells. It's going to affect their palate. It's going to affect their lifestyle. And so all those things level up to what could we do as a better option? And so making homemade cookies that are low in sugar, using the sweet spice for things that are training their palate to like new flavors. Little story, some of you know, my younger son is a pastor, and he's over the youth ministry. And he always says, Mom, don't get on your soapbox, because I'm always trying to convince him that a community organization like a church is such a powerful way to say, wait a minute, we're going to take care of God's temple. We can do better than donuts and pizza. And he's like, oh no, that's what they want. How else are we going to get them to youth group? And I tell him, if you're not good enough at talking about God's word, then you cannot rely on pizza to get them to come in. But I do feel like all of us are a really important pearl in the whole process. And whether it be a church or a community group or a family unit, those little changes are really the most profound. And just making little changes so that we can still enjoy every day. I didn't say you can never have anything sweet. It means that we've got to replace some of those really unhealthy treat foods that kids deserve to something better. Even adults deserve dessert. And so I was walking with a friend yesterday, and she said, well, I'm a new diabetic, and so I have got to figure out what I can have as my dessert, because I have to have my dessert. Talk about that ownership, right? My dessert. She did not want to give that up. And so it's a reality that we all want to look at. And how do we make sure that we are thinking healthy? And I always teasingly say it's never a good idea to love food too much, because then it becomes the center of our world. And let's hope that we have a lot more fun than just the food we eat. And so back to the slide, the insulin level is really what affects that internal environment. So it affects the biome, because high sugar concentration is not only unhealthy, but it kills off the variety of the biome. Also, it increases the estrogen levels. It also, when the estrogen levels are high, this is kind of a cascade of events that increases cell turnover, both speed and number. And so that's where we get worried with women that are postmenopausal and taking estrogen, or taking a medicine that promotes estrogen, or having external food sources or even environmental sources that are xenoestrogens. So xeno means false estrogens, but they act like those binders. So remember in the previous slide, when there's a receptor and a bind agent, it's going to cause those cells to grow differently. So we don't want speed and number of growth to be out of normal. We don't want it to be abnormal. And so this one I thought was really cool. As we're looking at the nutrition recommendations, this came from MD Anderson. This was really from one of the dietitians, I think, and I'll have her name on the next slide. But the recommendation is to limit red meats and processed meats. Eat 2.5 cups daily of vegetables and fruits, preferably the non-starchy. But I honestly took out the word non-starchy, because I still want you to do any vegetables, because I don't think most of us are able to get 2.5 to 3 cups of vegetables a day. So if you start off with including some sweet potato or some beet or some red potato with the skin, I want to count that, because those are part of our soluble fiber, and it's definitely a great source. And choosing plant-based proteins as often as possible means that our edamame fit right in. We had a great discussion on that last time. And thinking about having a couple of days a week where we don't have meat. Does anybody do that yet? A couple of days of no meat? Nope. Yes. Okay. So, you can have meat every day and have less of it. I think that's a huge win. We try to discourage the big piece of meat on the plate, the big steak. And if I'm lucky, I'll have a potato and a salad. And so realigning what that plate looks like is kind of what this is showing us. And variety is so fun. So you don't have to have an individual cup of broccoli and an individual cup of carrots. You can move it all together and have a stir fry. But I had this morning, don't laugh, I had ratatouille for breakfast, and it had eggplant and peppers and shallots and garlic and spinach in my ratatouille. So yeah, and so who says you have to have oatmeal? If you're not an oatmeal fan, trade it out, because veggies are great for breakfast. You can absolutely do that. And so when we think of 2/3 of veggies, what we want to do is use veggies in lots of different places. So here we have, think of the center of the plate, and we'll go easy. We'll go with something like quinoa. That's an easy protein that's going to be more plant-based, but we don't stop with just quinoa. What can we add into it to give us more servings of veggies? Well, we could do chopped onion, we could do cucumber, we could add some chopped kale, we could add some herbs, all into the protein alternative, which is the quinoa, right? Easy. So everywhere you think of, you want to add more servings and more color. And so there's the part of our plate. We've got our quinoa, and so now we can add in other vegetables. So what goes well with quinoa as a side dish? Anybody want to throw out an idea? At Powers Bakery, we did kale. So we had quinoa, kale, salad, and then I would add some arugula, and I would add some spaghetti squash, and there was our Buddha bowl. So 3 different salads, and you're going to say, yeah, but that's so much work, right, to make all those different salads, especially now that Powers Bakery is not open for us. But you can cook the spaghetti squash on Tuesday, and it will last at least a full week. So use it in different ways. So get in the habit of having that spaghetti squash cooked and pull little bits out and make it different throughout the week. Cut some cabbage. This is one of my jobs for my hubby that I love for him to do. I give him a whole head of green cabbage, and I say, okay, slice it thin. And he's so good at slicing it thin. So now I've got this big, beautiful bowl of cabbage. Some of it I'm going to marinate, and some of it I'm going to saute. Some of it I will put in with a pasta dish. And so I'm going to use cabbage in so many different ways. Also, it's great to make chow chow. So if you find at the end of the week you have more cabbage than you thought you could use, now you can squeeze, put into a bowl. You could add vinegar if you wanted, but if you wanted to do the natural fermentation style, bless you, Mary, you can add a little bit of sea salt, a little bit of herbs. If you've got any of my any of my Joe spice, you can put that on the cabbage and a little vinegar, and oh my gosh, and give it 24 hours and it'll be a fantastic condiment. Now you can add it to your breakfast taco. You can add it to a little side of your beet burger or your lentils, or of course your chicken dish. So cabbage is one that's so good. So that's another spot that you could add to your 2/3 of your plate. And even if you had meat, you could still have all of those items. You could have your spaghetti squash with some shredded chicken. And so you don't have to give up meat altogether, just a little splash of meat. If you love red meat, go ahead and consider the flank steak. Marinate that. Use some really good quality spices. Try your sweet spice. Marinate the flank steak, and then grill it. Remember, try not to get too dark of color in your grill, but once in a while, it's fine. And then add that to your salad, add that to quinoa, add it with your cabbage. So again, using a little bit of meat to season the vegetable dish is a great way to go. All right, so build your plate and use veggies in every step of the way. So here we've got 3 nutrients cancer survivors should know about. And this is where I quoted this little lady from MD Anderson, another dietitian. And healing after cancer treatment is really multifaceted, right? I mean, our bodies have just had a huge amount of toxic chemicals. So now we know our liver has done a lot of work trying to clean out that toxin. So our liver's been affected. We know that our bones are affected. Radiation and the chemo, and of course the hormones that we are changing radically. And so also the cardiovascular changes. So we know that going through chemo is no easy battle, and going through radiation is no easy battle. So how do we rebuild and help our bodies get healthy once again? So, you know, this beautiful picture came with her quote, and so you can see there that we've got avocado. Can you tell what's in the top picture? Kind of hard to tell. The bottom one you can probably tell easier. The bottom is chia seeds, yep, and the top one is flax. And then of course walnuts, and then olive oil. So she's kind of given us an image of 3 really important foods. That's iron, omega-3s, and flax seeds. So her take on it was, let's highlight 3 foods and make sure that we give plenty of ways to use these foods so that they become a normal element on your grocery list. So you buy them often, you use them in many ways so that you're getting a lot of benefit. And this little flow chart is really just showing you that flax seeds have lignans. We know that flax seeds are a source of those phytoestrogens, and that it just doesn't stop there. And that's why flax seeds are really in the limelight as far as research looking at cancer medicines, because flax oil and flax seeds have really shown to absolutely help in the work that tamoxifen is doing to your body and these estrogen binders. So it's helping the process of getting the bad estrogens away from those receptors and the good estrogens from the plant sources, helping us to still have some of the benefits of the bone strengthening and the cardiovascular benefits. So it, and again, these are fun terms if you want to throw them around at a dinner party, all these important chemical names. But really the mammalian lignans are what's so important, because the enterolactone and the enterodiol are those estrogen-like molecules that are they're similar to estrogen. So that's where we're getting this absolute benefit. It's sort of a double-edged sword. It prevents the bad estrogens from doing that binding to the receptors. And the good side is it's helping our body benefit from some of the estrogen that we need for our bones and for our cardiovascular system. And I did give you this handout. So let's look at this one for a minute. Because her other point was iron. Now, if we go plant-based and we're like gung-ho being vegan, it's possible that we don't get enough iron. I love the story of one of my son's little buddies. His name was Carlos, and he was a vegetarian. So he'd come over to our house, and I'd say, "Yay! Let me give you all these vegetables." And he'd say, "No. I don't eat anything green, but I'm a vegetarian," which meant that he was not getting nearly enough iron, right? Because if you don't eat the bright colors, you're a starchitarian, you're not a vegetarian, right? And that's what he thought he was. But anyway, so how much iron do we need? The top grid there gives you an idea. Boys 14 to 18 get 11 milligrams, girls 15, males 19 and over 8 milligrams, females 18. So that's where we bridge off, and of course we know why. Women lose some blood. Males are really building their musculature, and I'm actually surprised that the milligram amount goes down a little bit from the 18 age range to the 19. But let's just say we know for sure it's less than for women. And females 19 to 50, 18 milligrams a day, pregnancy 27, and then down again to 8 milligrams a day as we get older. And that's again because we're not menstruating. But we still want to make sure we get plenty of iron. And if we are eating meat and we're eating it 3 times a week, 3 to 5 ounces 3 times a week, you're getting plenty of iron. The red meats. And so what is red meats? And of course it means beef, it means pork. Doesn't really mean chicken, except the dark meat chicken. So if you have gotten in the habit of buying the air-chilled organic chicken thighs, which I definitely recommend, that's what we made our Chicken Joe with at the bakery, and such a great quality product, you're getting some iron because it's dark in color, that myoglobin. Not as much, a little bit, but not as much. So for iron, for the purposes of that. So here we are getting some numbers, and I have to chuckle. We got lamb liver. When's the last time you had some lamb liver? Sardines, which I actually love sardines. And then the third one down, kangaroo. This list came from an Australian group, which I just had to chuckle. That is so funny. And then we've got chicken, eggs, and we've got beef and tuna. So those are really great in giving you your iron content. We've got 6 milligrams in the sardines. The beef 1.31, so another good reason to get those little canned fish. And then look over at the plant-based iron sources and note that it's not as easily absorbed. So this is where we talk about heme iron and non-heme iron. And that's just that it doesn't have the binder that helps our body absorb it when it comes from plants.
And I have a question about that because I just looked at it's a whole sprouted grain organic hamburger bun. And it says just eating one of those has 100% of the daily amount of iron, but then that's from plant based. So then presumably it isn't as beneficial as it would be from
It's
meat.
just going to be a little harder to absorb. So I like that, Mary. What we would do is make sure there's some vitamin C with that meal. So there's your tomato and your spinach salad to help absorb. And even though you're not getting 100% absorption, perhaps, it depends on your gut biome. If you've got a healthy biome, chances are you're going to absorb more of it. So that's a plus. And if your liver is healthy, there's another plus. So there's these vague components of you may or may not get all of that. So we don't want to stop with just getting that one bun, right? We want to get other sources in the mix of the week. And I always want you to think of a week. Don't necessarily get obsessed about a day getting everything in. I can't tell you how many clients I've had that give me this long list from MyFitnessPal, and it's 10 pages long, and it's all the nutrients that they've gotten every day. And it's like, oh, I'm going to pull my hair out, because our body's really good at holding on to nutrients for a period of time until our body needs it. And our absorbency will adjust if we don't have access to much of it. Meaning that if we don't have much iron in our diet, our body is better at absorbing what we do have in our diet. It's pretty cool. So just note real quickly there on the right, the red lentils, 9 milligrams of iron. I love red lentils. Cashews, 5 milligrams. So when we made our cashew cream sauce that we used for our pasta, and we used a bonza or a bean style pasta, and we used the cashew cream sauce, that was a whopper of iron. Yes, some of it won't be as absorbed as if we were getting red meat, but here's the flip side. If we have a diet that's too high in red meat, now we're affecting our biome and making it harder to digest, contributing to constipation or slower gut motility. And so we've got to find that little balancing act. I love chickpeas too are on there. Tofu is on there. And down below it has examples of iron-rich diets. So it's giving you like a little combination of things. And that's why I wanted to print it out for you so you could kind of see all the ways that we can get our combination for the best absorption. And then what are some other ways to get more iron? Well, if you don't have a cast iron skillet, that's kind of the, home version of getting more iron, but it really does make a difference. Yeah. Yep. It really does make a difference. And even if you season your cast iron skillet well, you still get some benefit of the iron. And of course, lean meats are there, but the darling of all of my talks are what? Seeds and nuts. And so really, when you add pumpkin seeds and chia and hemp hearts and walnuts, if you eat those on a regular basis, you are pretty well set with getting your minerals, including iron. And so, I really want to include this because meal planning is from all food groups. And so whether you're really focusing on being more plant-based, you still want the group of foods that provide you with protein and iron and calcium, instead of trying to take a supplement. Always think of ways you can incorporate. This one's kind of cool too. The American Cancer Society really posts great information on healthy eating and active living research highlights. It talks about cancer facts. And I included this slide because, again, it's really teaching us the same mantra, and that is there's some things we can change and some things we can't change. Number one is the environmental carcinogens. Thank goodness we don't allow smoking in public places anymore. But I grew up when I couldn't say anything because my parents were smoking in the car or the dinner table. And when I flew to France in 1983, I was in a plane for 18 hours with people that smoked. So thank goodness that doesn't happen anymore. But we've really, we've come a long way. And of course, not allowing children to be around it, and I don't guess that anybody here is a smoker, but I do cringe when I see parents with their kids nearby and they're smoking. But the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has a great list of recommendations to avoid cancer risk. And that's always where we're going with this. Healthy, balanced eating. Of course, we know frying foods at a high temperature, and we've talked a lot about that. And of course, I've taken it to the next level and said, hey, try not to even cook with oil. Now, if that's too hard to even fathom, at least avoid high temperature cooking. You know, right now the media would like to tell us that there's some oils that are better for cooking high temperatures. To me, that's moot. I would rather you not cook with oils. Use them for flavor, for addition, and instead cook with water. So steaming preserves so much. I know what, but I promise you it will get good. If I can show you how to make it, it's a good scenario that gives you lots of flavor. And now we just need to learn how to add flavor post-cooking and even in the water of cooking. So yeah, air frying helps too. Remember we talked, and it'll come in this section here, we want to avoid acrylamide. And so down there at that lower section, acrylamide is a serious cancer-causing carcinogen that is in our environment. It's naturally occurring, but also we exacerbate our access to it if we cook at high temperatures. And so the other one here I thought was interesting is down at the bottom, do not store raw potatoes in the refrigerator because it increases the sugar content. And we were just talking, Miss Evelyn, about how fruits seem to be sweeter and sweeter over time. So I'm so glad you shared that article, because the sugar content is really what propagates the acrylamide. So cooking at high temperature, sweet chemicals, of course, the sugars in the food exacerbate that whole paradigm. So not too sweet. Don't put your potatoes in the refrigerator to avoid extra sweetness. And so I love this little picture. It reminded me of all of these beautiful walkers that were at one of the events for ThriveWell. And I just love the fact that we have participation in so many events that really honor getting out and moving and being healthy. And, you know, just a note there on the acrylamide before I close for questions. If we use more plant-based foods, we automatically cut down the amount of acrylamide because we're eating more fresh vegetables, more fresh fruits. And just by doing that, it'll really cut your amount. I'm doing a little bit of research, which I'll share with you next week, on coffee. Coffee and toast matter to me because they are high acrylamide access points. And so I'm learning about what we can do to cut that down. So of course in toast, you just don't want to make it dark brown, but I'm kind of like you guys. I want nice crispy toast, but you know, learning how to use different approaches to adding flavor, adding texture, make it good. So it's always about what we don't know. It's hard to give up the familiar because we don't know what we don't know. And so experimenting with new ways of serving up breakfast and new ways of serving up our savory meals at lunch and dinner allow us to go, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought, to try to eat cleaner and including more seeds and nuts. And I wanted to really help you see where this whole process is happening in California. You know, the West and East Coast always do the extremes first. And when I was there visiting, I bought some pumpkin seeds, and it had this Prop 65 warning on there. And it's warning that my pumpkin seeds could cause cancer. And I thought, what? How could that be? It's because of the acrylamide. And so Prop 65 requires businesses to provide warnings to Californians about significant exposures to chemicals that cause cancer. These chemicals in the products that they purchase, it can be in the environment, it can be in their home, and Californians want all the information. And so I love that it was on my pumpkin seeds.
I mean, that stuff freaks you out though. Like when I first read it, because you see it on like clothing labels, you know, it's just like, oh my goodness. And then, you know, I got rid of all the plastic containers.
Yes.
So I use glass.
Good.
But I had a question too, but I don't want to.
Okay, we'll get you in a minute. I'm almost done. But you know, who decides what these chemicals, how do they get on this list? And so it's quite an involved process. And it made me think of the grass roots, the grass generally regarded as safe. And it's kind of the same way. I mean, this list has lots of boards and experts deciding what chemicals should go on it or not. And so it turned out, again, with the seeds, there's two potential chemicals on pumpkin seeds and, hemp hearts and all these seeds. And that is aflatoxins, which you might have heard of in peanut butter, that causes a strong allergy. And then, of course, the way that the nuts and seeds have been toasted. So now it's going to be oh hum again, because to get the very safest nuts, we need organic and raw. Those aren't nearly as easy to love as toasted and lightly salted, right? But I'm going to try. And so I love my little Lucy over there, because, who gets to... Right. I love her too. But, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and of course the National Toxicology Report is what I kind of looked at. And I'm going to show you a list here real quick, but it's amazing. And I won't belabor over this, but this is all the requirements for getting chemicals on that Prop 65. And so again, environment and food have two different categories, but on this Prop 65, it's covering everything. And so these known carcinogens, I mentioned the aflatoxins, but look at number 2, alcohol. So alcohol can be considered a source of exposure to a potential carcinogen, specifically attacking mouth, larynx, liver, colorectal, and breast. Some of these other ones are a little more, obscure, but arsenic and arsenic compounds are primarily in foods and drinking water, soil and groundwater. That's kind of scary. And so water contaminants are a real concern, which is kind of why we probably are all using bottled water these days. Benzene, I talked about a lot in our previous classes. Again, not smoking is a really easy way to avoid that. And then benzene can also be found in some dyes. So again, food, snacks, and treats that are highly colored are scary. I had an athlete that I'm working with, and she's very thin. She's actually a cancer patient, and she loves being on her bike. And we were trying to figure out what could she eat on the road that's easy. And so we came up with a list of things, but gummy bears have been a huge win for her. And so I did a little research. I know, because it's simple sugars. Yep, because she's very thin. We don't want her to lose weight. But we found an organic gummy bear that is naturally colored, and so they're not very bright and pretty, but it worked. And so I was so excited that we could find a gummy bear that wasn't full of carcinogens. And so this is my last slide, and it's a recipe that I wanted to share. And I promise you, I'm making this, and I'm really excited about the add-in. So I've given you all a little container of sweet spice, and just so you know what's in it, it's allspice, cloves, cinnamon, and a little bit of organic coconut sugar. So it's about probably a teaspoon of coconut sugar to a third of a cup of the spices. So it doesn't have much.
You say those again.
Allspice, cloves, star anise, I think I forgot to say, and cinnamon, and then a little bit of the coconut sugar. So I hope you experiment with unusual at breakfast. I'm honestly doing this so I can get away from my extra toasted Ezekiel bread, and see what you think. So do buy your flax seeds fresh. Do buy them unground. Keep them in the fridge. Same thing for your pumpkin seeds and your hemp hearts. Well, and while this slide is still up, do notice that in the 221 calories, it's got a lot of fat, which is okay, because at breakfast, we're gonna keep our metabolism active. But I don't think I would be comfortable on 8 carbs. So personally, could I not add that in? I think I did on your recipe. I said some examples of how to add more carbs to it. So add in some of the quick cook oats.
Okay, at first I thought you were going to say it was too many carbs or something. I was like, what?
No, I don't think it's enough carbs for me. But, my body's used to more carbs. But I love the fact that it's got all this. Now, I should have included the grams of fiber, because it's going to be awesome in fiber too.
And then presumably the saturated fat would be lower, right? Because that's always going to be the total fat.
Yes. I mean, the fats, of course, are just coming from the flax seeds, so you could look that one up. Oh, I'm sorry, and the egg. One egg has 3 grams of saturated fat and 2 of unsaturated.
Okay.
So you're looking at probably 5 grams of saturated fat in there. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody.